Welcome to another riveting edition of Risk and Return. I'm Charlie Gasparino from my home base here in Connecticut. Bob Sloan is wherever Bob Sloan is. We don't know. He's an international man of mystery. He is the founder, the CEO of S3 Data, the largest independent data provider on the Bloomberg network, and one of the best sources of information that I, as a journalist, has ever tapped into. We should point out that we had a pretty wild week last week, Bob, with Jack Devine, the counterterrorism expert, former CIA, top guy in the CIA, made some pretty interesting, bold claims about the Straits of Hormuz. And I think, listen, he wasn't setting a timetable on when they would be open and when oil will start flowing. Correct. And we get out of $95 a barrel. But what he was unequivocal about was that they will be open, and they will be open at some point pretty soon. Why don't you elaborate a little bit on that and what it means for the price of oil and everything? I don't understand why the Straits of Hormuz is such a big thing when we have a ton of oil coming out of the U.S., but I'm just a dumb reporter.
Well, it's about the price of oil, right? And the perceived price of oil and how long it stays high. And so, one way to look at it is to say, if the price of oil goes above $85 a barrel and stays there, which it obviously has gone above $85. But if it stays there for a prolonged period of time, then that's a tax, so to speak, that causes too much political disruption. And I think what Jack is saying is that if the United States wants the Straits open, it'll be open. It's just a question of what's the price you're going to pay. And it wasn't a question of capability. It's a question of strategy. And his point was, if you take Carg Island, you basically control the source of oil for the country. Now, we got a lot of uptake on X, basically saying, well, this was a stupid call. And, it just shows you the time frame of people is so instantaneous. We've done how many thousands upon thousands of targets have we hit in a compressed time frame? And we are expecting an instantaneous solution to, what's a very sticky problem. Now, it is a little surprising that we don't have the minesweepers, right, readily available. But, maybe given the overall capability of the U.S. Armed Forces, maybe that was the whole plan all along, right? I think Jack's point was, that in reading articles about what's going on in Iran, the lens is last century. We just eliminated the top leadership of a country.
And we still are. I mean, as we're...
And by the way, and we'll continue to do so until it's destabilized, right? I mean, that's the point. That is a new playbook. We parachuted in and actually took out Maduro, and that is not Noriega. This is something very different, very, very different in the support and the proxy state that Venezuela was. So to go in there and basically take the guy and snatch him and grab him and put him in jail and follow up on an indictment that already existed, by the way, under both administrations. Jack's saying the rule book is different. So why are we reporting on it as if it's something that's the same? It's not.
Yeah,
now, lot of the that's the criticism we got was, hey, you guys got it wrong. Let's see.
Well, we don't get any. It's not that we made a prediction. We quoted a guy that explains how he thinks the world's going to turn out in a few weeks, and I think he's more at this point. He's obviously more right than wrong. They're gonna open up the Straits of Hormuz. I mean, every day there's just inexorable pressure to do so. They're going to do something with Carg Island. I mean, whether they invade or not, I can't tell you, but they will do something. They will neutralize it in some way and surround it. They'll probably invade it. They'll probably put like an expeditionary force there. And
it's like, people forget I did not watch the Academy Awards. I purposely stayed away.
I
We can
watched
talk
them.
about that. Okay. Well, I love to get your take because I didn't have to. It wasn't like a movie where I didn't know the ending. Right? I knew what we were going to get, and the one thing that did strike me was interesting to me is that Rob Reiner who tragically died, and his wife too, in just a crazy circumstance. He produced the movie Few Good Men. Where did that take place? Guantanamo Bay.
Yeah.
The United States has a lot of experience at carving out enclaves in hostile enemy territory. This would be no different. We have a lot of experience at doing it.
Yeah. Yeah. I just full disclosure, I watched it because a friend of mine is David Zaslav of Warner Brothers Discovery, the CEO, just sold the company to Paramount,
Right.
Skydance, and the Ellisons. And David, David wants to leave. No, David wants Hollywood. A little insight, and I've been reporting this out. He wants Hollywood to know that he's good at the big screen as well as cutting stuff. He's known
Mm-hmm.
as a balance sheet guy, and he took a lot of guff over the last 2 years running this company, Warner Brothers Discovery, just cutting, cutting, cutting. But this year they scored big on various. Now whether you like the movies or not, that's a whole other story. But
That's a whole different story.
but they scored big on Sinners, and the one with Leonardo DiCaprio, whatever it's called,
Right.
I can't remember. I'm not going to watch that. I watched Sinners, which I thought was interesting. But here's an interesting take on the Oscars from a guy named on Twitter. I follow him on Twitter. His name is Nick Kyle. He's the host of a show on Audacity. He follows me. I follow him. Nick points out that in 1996, the Oscars had 45 million viewers in 1996, 36 million in 2006. In 2016, it went down to 34 million, so it's stabilizing. But this year, in 2026, 17 million people watched. What I found fascinating about this number is just how little relevance the Oscars have in American life these days, and they used to be something to watch, and at least to cheer someone getting the best picture. But I think that when you see it falling from 34 to 17, you got to ask yourself, well, what happened between those during that time? Now, some of this is cord cutting and the lack of relevance of traditional TV, but a lot of this, I think, is woke. This is exactly the period of time, Bob, when Hollywood's business model went so far left. And I've written a book about this, and you can't miss unmistakable correlation there that people don't like the left wing politics. Free Gaza. I mean, it was. And by the way,
But are the movies making money? So forget about the audience of the Oscars, which is interesting in that it is half of what it was 20 years ago. But you would expect that, right? Because of streaming, et cetera, people they don't want to sit for 3.5 hours and watch a show. That's like old school.
yeah,
No one, very few people do that anymore. They want something quick, something biteable. They don't have cable. They may not even have like mainstream TV. They just have their news feeds, and that's what they consume. So you would expect that. But are the movies themselves very profitable? And that to me would be the Bud Light moment, right? So it's like, you know what? Our audience is cut in half. We're not really making money. At the end of the day, that's what drives everything. And so it'd be interesting to see if they actually made a lot of money.
well, they make a lot less money. I mean, listen, if you get 90 to 100 million production, right? That's Sinners. It's allegedly grossed 370 worldwide.
So 3 times is it doesn't have to be, but it's the production's 100, and then by the time you get through distribution, everything else, it needs to make like 2 or 3x the production. I've forgotten what the math is, but it's something like that. So it's nicely profitable.
Yeah,
Nicely profitable.
but that's the biggest one, so it's not hugely profitable.
Right? Nicely profitable.
Now, what was the one?
I think, right?
And that's Sinners, which was kind of a interesting. It was about vampires, right?
Yeah.
What was the other one? The other one they won on.
Paramount. I didn't even. I didn't follow it that closely.
You know, what was Best Picture? This was the Best Picture. Okay, One Battle After Another. Let's look at
One battle after another. That's right.
Was
With DiCaprio, etc.
One Battle After Another profitable? No. The 2005 film One Battle After Another did not make money. Despite global box office gross of $209 million, the film was considered a commercial flop. So there you go. That and that movie was
Ultimately, that's
that movie
right.
was highly political. I mean, Sinners wasn't. Sinners was, there was some. Sinners was a vampire movie. Let's be real clear. It was a horror
But
movie.
one battle after another was basically, be a revolutionary, be
Yeah,
a better revolutionary, be a better insurgent. Go do it. Like it was a call to that.
yeah, and it was a parable to what's going on now. Trying to say, this is, this is ICE, attacking your communities. Here's how we can fight back. And most Americans don't view ICE as some sort of invading force. They look at it as like, we got overrun by immigration. Listen, by the way, I'm not saying immigrants are bad. I'm just saying that if you're illegal, we have a welfare state that can't sustain you, and that's all they're doing is sending people back. They're not putting them in concentration camps. You know what I'm saying?
What about the Save Act? What do you hear? Do you hear anything about what's going to go? What's going to happen with that?
This is unpack the Save Act a little for me, okay?
So, it's an irony. What's the most valuable thing that we have as Americans?
I don't know.
The most valuable thing.
I think it's the First Amendment, but freedom of speech,
I would say right to vote first.
right to vote. Okay, gotcha.
And then I would probably say First Amendment would be second.
Right.
But right to vote first. Right. Everybody has a right to vote if you're a citizen. If you go out and buy Claritin, do you have to show your driver's license?
Yes.
Okay. If you go to the airport, do you have to show your driver's license?
Absolutely. Anywhere you got it. I mean, listen, it's ubiquitous, right?
Right. Okay. It's for anything that you do, you have to prove identity. Do you want, by the way, you want to be a licensed person in the securities business? You have to show driver's. You have to show.
Yeah, I'm applying for TSA. What is the free? The pre-check, right? So I got to show a lot of stuff.
Okay. So I could give you a list of 30 things that are not nearly as valuable as the right to vote that you have to show identity for. And yet, somehow, the SAVE Act is like, we can't do that. Now, here's one of the reasons why. In the SAVE Act, and I've been doing a little studying on this, and it is very stringent. You have to show a passport. You have to show either that or a birth certificate. It's a level higher than a driver's license as the means of identity, right? So, and there's a whole bunch of different things. If you were born outside the United States, it is very high bar. It's the highest bar, right? Because basically it takes a federal ID rather than a state ID to prove that you actually live where you live.
So you have to show that you have to have a birth certificate if you're a U.S. citizen.
Yep.
Or is this only applied to like people that were born outside the country?
No, it's what qualifies. Like, what can you bring to your voting?
And it's not just
station?
a license anymore.
That's right. And that voting station or when you apply for a vote and you register, you have to actually show these things rather than just a driver's license.
Well, I mean, then show it. I mean, by the way, okay. Does that mean the federal government's not going to, give you access to your birth certificate or whatever, your passport?
No, but it's a different thing. It's a states' rights versus federal right around who controls elections.
Yeah,
and
I mean,
that is really what's at the center.
I get that, but if people are voting that shouldn't be voting, that's a real problem.
I totally agree. But would you cut down on the fraud 90% if you had a state driver's license? If you just use what's today. So to buy a controlled substance drug, if you want to buy, cough syrup with codeine, you got to show your driver's license, right? I can name a gazillion things where you have to show a driver's license. To me, that should be the bar. It shouldn't be a level higher. And I'm totally for people proving that they actually are citizens, but they actually live here. I think that's important. That you just don't import people and say anybody can vote. Then you've lost control of your electorate, and you're not really a sovereign nation anymore. But it is very high. So perhaps there's a compromise that driver's license will do it. But I don't know. We'll see. But that is what the SAVE Act, and there's a bunch of other different things that, like everything in Congress, it gets loaded up with a lot of different items when they try to pass something. So that movie is a reaction to that.
Yeah, but when you talk to most Americans and they say, "Listen, do you mind showing your ID when you vote?"
I don't care. I would do it in a heartbeat because it's the most valuable thing we have.
Okay, here's my ID. You can get a birth certificate. By the way, it takes like minutes to get your birth certificate if you really want to vote.
100%. Look, there's not a. I think it's a common sense, rational thing.
And if you're from another country without a passport, what does that tell you?
You couldn't get one.
You're here illegally, right?
Well, but that's what I mean. But, it's actually bad on two fronts, right? One, you couldn't get one. Two, you're here illegally.
This is
not in the
system. Got to stop. It's got to stop. People have to be, it's. I was once, someone who was for open borders on grounds that, well, I don't believe in the welfare state. If you want immigrants here that just want to strive and work and not go on welfare and not tap in to the sort of ecosystem that's provided by the taxpayer, that's what I would support. But obviously, that's not what goes down. That's not. If you're an immigrant, you can work 10 jobs, but you may not have health care. You don't speak English. You're very poor, and you're living in areas that need to give you certain benefits, like schooling and for your kids and health care and this. That sort of strain on the system outweighs any of the benefits because it's like 5 states are paying for all of that, while the country theoretically reaps the productivity gains of people working 10 jobs and not making a lot of money. That is a recipe for disaster.
Listen, I think that we should protect our most sacred right. It is the right to vote. It's what makes this country different from everywhere else. It is a republic. And that is something that I think you need to protect. You can't dilute that.
Yeah, I'm with you on that.
Right?
I think that's a good segue into some stock stuff. What do you think about these markets? By the way, what do you think of the markets? They're all over the place every day, up, down. I guess it's only, it depends on the headline about the war,
Well, sure it does. Here's, I think it's pretty clear, and I think Jack said this last week, is that we control the airspace, undoubtedly.
Yeah.
And it's very clear that when a guy feels pretty safe marching in a parade, now, by the way, it was a pretty pathetic parade. The guy was like on a motor scooter, it wasn't exactly in like a, a Lamborghini. He wasn't in like a Lamborghini, SUV waving to the crowd. He was in like a motor scooter or whatever. And then 2 days later, he's gone. And then the besieged deputy, he's gone too. There's obviously a network on the ground that is identifying these people, that is feeding that to Assad. There was an amazing story in the Wall Street Journal where the journal actually was able to either, as the calls were being made or probably post, seeing transcripts of.
I saw that.
That was an incredible story where they have everybody's cell phone number. They're calling and saying, "I got to you, right? What do you want to do?" So in that level of not only air defense, but also cyber no defense, probably a matter of time. I hope so, right? I think everybody's hoping the same thing. So, oil is everything right now. And, there's a lot of stories about how Iran has strategically done something great because it shows that America no longer has economic dominance. It can do this, but it has to do it forever. And I think that's what Jack was saying is like, okay, next week or 2 or 3, it takes a while to take the Marine Division and move them from, wherever we're moving them from into the region. We have to stage things. It's not going to happen overnight. It is logical. It should have been logical, I think, to be a little critical. It should have been logical that the Strait of Hormuz was going to
Yeah.
was going to be blockaded mined missile. I mean, that was not that hard to figure out. So, and it's never really been clear whether or not there was a smoking gun. Although it's hard for me to believe that we would do what we're doing without one. And I think that's Trump's genius, right? Is that he always keeps everybody guessing.
Well, you said it, Bob, when they, I don't know about smoking gun. I mean, you're the one who said we're going in, and here's why. They threatened to kill him.
Oh, that's exactly right. And that we have the correct read on that. So, look, I don't pretend to say, hey, we have a crystal ball on everything. I think people that say they really know what's happening or think they know don't. But at the same time, there are a couple of very inexorable things happening. One is you cannot run a country if you don't control your airspace. And if you don't control your electronic space, your cyberspace. And I mean that both literally, like your satellite capability, but also your internet capability, if that's been compromised. I think that's probably means that you can't last more than a couple of months. You proved your point, yes. At the end, though, you're going to cave.
This is,
right?
Yeah, I agree too. I mean, listen, obviously everything could have been done better, and who knows what they were planning on. Maybe they thought they took everything out at first, but this country is not really a country right now. They have no leadership.
No.
They have warring. They have factions in there that know that they're going to die if they allow, if there is they'll fight to the end, maybe, or maybe they'll cut a deal. You know what I'm saying? And Trump, I think, would cut a deal right now with some military thing.
I love following Admiral Savridis, the ex-NATO commander. He's very common sense. He is so steeped in not only naval experience, but history. Knows the world, practically better than anybody. He came out yesterday. I follow him. I've seen him speak several times. I've met him a couple of times. Just a terrific. When you meet someone like that, you go, wow, we are so lucky to have people like that dedicate their lives to service. And he's an incredible intellectual, but also a man of action. And he said, look, you would take Karg, it's kind of game over. And people say, oh, the Chinese could pay him $40 billion. Look, the Chinese did the roads, the Belt and Roads.
Right.
They want something. They're not just going to give you $50 billion because. And it's going to be, you got to buy something from us. We're not just going to give you a $50 billion loan when you have really nothing to give us because it's sitting with the Marine 5th Division surrounding it. So, and we got a lot of who knows if they're spoof or not. We got a lot of criticism for the quote unquote unstrategic thinking, but that is the ultimate strategy. Is that the choke point is the oil, and for them, and the choke point is the oil for China too. They know it, we know it, and I just hope Trump doesn't lose his nerve. Finish the job.
I don't think he will this time. I think he's. I think losing his nerve would be they come to him. Here's what we're going to do. We're not going to. We're going to dismantle nuclear. we're going to keep the peace. We're going to stay in control.
Yeah.
Um, and and but who knows? I mean, they may be on. The problem is this is a foggy war, right? And so we don't know. And I
All war is foggy,
and you,
right?
yeah,
All
it's all
war is
foggy. And by the way,
all.
it's all messy. I mean, my uncle fought in World War II. Um, you know, Everybody thinks that that was done mechanically and Patton did this, and you don't realize how many screw ups there were in World War II, and how changes people, how the U.S. Army improvised. I mean, there was something very famous in World War II called the Battle of the Bulge, and my uncle was in that, where Patton's
In
Fifth
Bastogne.
Army was going towards
Yeah.
Berlin, and then the Germans up top go across the Ardennes and head right for Antwerp in a last ditch. They assembled their best tanks, and they could have essentially split our army, surrounded Bastogne, destroyed it, and by the way, sued for some sort of negotiated peace. Patton turned around. Ike had a demand that he turn around, go straight up, and free the besieged city of Bastogne. So now, should we have known that the Germans were going to mount a winter offensive when they were about to lose the war? I guess so. They've never done it before. And I did a little reading on this. I mean, it was like probably the first time in years. But my point is, this is like, no one knows what's going to happen. And you don't know what's on the ground. And by the way, after the Germans did that, it was over. That was their last. As they say, Bob, they blew their load right there.
Yeah. Well, who's the Iranian McAuliffe, right? The famous general that sent the word. The Germans asked for a surrender. They had Bastogne surrounded, and what did he say? One word:
Nuts.
nuts. Right. So that's you know, are we at that moment where they feel where they can make a last stand and actually survive? And it always comes down to espionage. Who has the better intel and the better
We
information?
do have good. We do have good intel because if the Israelis are calling people up,
Yeah.
let's get into some
So
stocks. I mean, I guess this is a market that's contingent on headlines coming out of the Middle East. Our viewers should know that. We as you and I, just our opinion is that we think that this is going to have a decent outcome at some point. Who knows when? I will say I spoke with a few hedge fund managers. I don't want to discount the negative viewpoint that if you have a combination of this thing dragging on, which will throw markets into a sort of into turmoil for an elongated period of time. You have AI disruption, cutting jobs. You could see a recessionary scenario here. I mean, I just want to throw that out there. I've heard that from really smart people that are worried about this thing going on for a long time and that becoming that rising. It's that becoming the reality just in time for the midterms. Now, every Republican I talk to tells me they think this is going to be over well before the midterms. So, just you know,
so if we look at USO, which is the ETF that uh, mirrors the oil stock price, the shorts are up, dramatically, right? The short interest is 9 million
right.
shares. It's up 50% short interest growth, and that's telling you that people are just hedging. They're long oil, and that's how they're hedging it. They're hedging it through shorting USO, but also, even though you've seen a dramatic rise, some of those things are leveling off, right? So they're kind of fading the spike in oil. And again, I think it comes down to that price. $85 seems to be the equilibrium. If you can keep oil at $85 through hook or by crook, and to your point, Charlie, about being independent energy producer, that's the main thing. Does it get enough production fast enough online to keep the price of oil?
No, it's up. It's rising to 100 today. It's at 98.
Yeah, 98. And so we're getting but it's not 150.
Yeah,
No, and so let's see.
I agree with you. I mean, we had 120 under Biden, and that was because of Ukraine, but inflation, ESG, remember, all that stuff is done. We produce a lot of oil here. You're not going to have gas lines. Okay, this is not 1978 or 73. 78 is kind of around the time I pumped some gas. I remember I was, but I remember the odd and even days.
Yes,
We're not gonna have that. When you had
there's
an
a
odd number on your license plate, you can get gas. If you did,
totally.
we ain't having that.
No,
We're not that. We're not there. So just remember, this is a strong country, and I have friends on the right. I would say Tucker Carlson's a friend, Megyn Kelly's a friend, and a few others that'll say we didn't have to do this and we shouldn't have. And I respect their opinion, and I like them as people. I know a lot of other people who explain why we had to do this, and I'm on the listen. I don't like Americans losing their lives. I mean, it's not. I'm not fighting. We do have a volunteer armed forces, by the way. Trust me. A lot of my friends volunteered to fight back in the day. When they signed up for the Marines, and they made the. In any event,
So U.S. So getting back to the market for a second, you know, one day after this is all over, we'll have to have a discussion around some of the former Fox colleagues and what they were actually doing or not doing during this point in time. That would be an interesting thing to talk about. But let's talk about something else, which is Blue Owl. Blue Owl, obviously the very large private credit fund management shop, has a lot of bets in private credit. There was a story on the front page of the Journal which has been mirroring a lot of what we've been saying on the show, which is that the reason why people are short Blue Owl is that no one believes the marks that they have on not just their book, and I don't want to single them out particularly, but just the industry generally. John Zito was the head of Apollo, was at a UBS conference. I don't think he thought he was being taped.
oh, I remember that. Yes.
If you haven't read that article, read it, because basically it's a confirmation of every single data point that we've been going over on this show, which is that there's a reason why in the software sector you see short interest rising. There's a reason why on history, compared to its own history, things like Salesforce and things like Autodesk, et cetera, are very, very, very high short interest. So, look at Blue Owl here for a second. The short interest is in black, the price is in blue. You can see it's marching higher and higher. Even when it seems to drop, like in December, it rebounds and goes higher. So negative bets, a lot of negative bets here on Blue Owl.
Interesting on short. This is interesting on Coinbase.
It is interesting on Coinbase. But short interest is very high, but it's leveled off, right? So we think though that it's actually in short squeeze territory.
Coinbase, a short squeeze potential.
So we score it on 1 to 100. 70 is a threshold. It just crossed the 70 threshold, and that means that there's a combination of factors. It's not just covering, or it's not just one thing. There are many, many, many things that have to happen to actually make a short squeeze happen. So those factors are now converging to make the R score higher. So Coinbase squeeze score territory. If you look at inside the buy side and you look at the Z scores, and I love this. I just love this chart because it really shows you the inside market dynamic. You can look at price, you can look at price action, you can look at all sorts of moving day averages, et cetera, daily average volumes, and so on. But these scores is something that's on the terminal. If you have our data on the terminal, you can do this. If you don't know how, you can give us a call. Just go AA on your Bloomberg terminal. The rep there will tell you how to do this. Look at the top short Z scores. Now remember, Z scores are those things that are high compared to itself over history. What do you see? You see UiPath, which is a very interesting fulcrum for bets on AI and against AI. And a lot of the, UiPath was an enterprise, basically a bot, so to speak,
Right.
agent to handle enterprise software. And there was a debate going on. You mentioned before about unemployment. This stock, everybody needs to watch it. That and CoreWeave, because CoreWeave goes back to Blue Owl, right? It's all connected.
CoreWeave and UiPath are key stocks to watch. Okay.
The key stock to watch because it's one of two things is true. Either everybody gets laid off, or actually we can't lay off people because we need someone to monitor what the actual agents are doing. We need highly skilled people.
Right.
And so the job actually transfers or changes and evolves over time. So there's this fabulous debate that's going on in this stock. But if you look at Workday, Salesforce, Dynatrace, DocuSign, Autodesk, et cetera, they're all high. And so this is telling you that people are worried about AI, they're worried about enterprise software still, and they're worried about the credit overhang. So, I was on Bloomberg a little while ago, last week, and one of the things that was interesting, Charlie, they used this quote like 3 or 4 days in a row. We had made the argument, and still make the argument, that the data is saying a couple of things. One, CoreWeave is a very important stock because it is the proving ground, the leveraged stress test for the NVIDIA demand thesis, right? You go out, you borrow money, you buy chips, and you try to rent out computing, as they call compute, and you try to make that grow faster than your debt service. The debt service is coming from people like Blue Owl. Short interest very high there as well. So the NVIDIA business model, short interest very high on CoreWeave. The financing model, Blue Owl, what's short interest saying there is we don't believe the marks, which is exactly what happened like a week later. The Wall Street Journal did a front page story where you have one of the lead people at Apollo saying that we don't believe the marks. So we were making the argument that, Blue Owl this starts to feel like a little bit 08. This is why the Lloyd Blankfeins and the Jamie Dimons and the Michael Aaron Gettys are starting to frame things in 08. And Michael Bookstaber, who's a very well-respected risk manager, had an article in the Times yesterday. Charlie, it's amazing how people, I think, how should I say, borrow a lot from this show. Yeah.
Well, we do a little borrowing. At least I do the
borrowing.
borrowing. You come up with your own stuff.
No, but it's amazing to me that we come up with and explain publicly, and no one says, oh, as we saw on Risk and Return, or I saw on Bob on Bloomberg, or I saw Charlie on Fox. It's just pathetic.
Well, here's the thing, Bob. I will say this.
This thesis, right, this thesis that Blue Owl is bare. And so who's the next Lehman Brothers, by the way? People think that, Oracle, because they have $100 billion of investment grade debt that's now trading, the CDS was very high, but then it blew out and it recovered. But the short interest there is high too. And historically, compared to itself, high. Is that Lehman Brothers? Now, we said those things. And we said, look, I personally think that there was also a story this week about Bloomberg, right? And what we're seeing, Charlie, is there's so much advertising that parades as influencers that's creating a monstrous echo chamber that very, 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 very smart people are out of their element. And what makes this so different is, Robert Oppenheimer and Einstein and the UChicago folks that actually invented the atom bomb, they understood the end. They understood it. They understood it end to end. They understood what the birth meant, but they also understood what actually using it meant. When you invent something that is this profoundly revolutionary, And no one can say, this is how we think it ends. We don't know.
Well, that's part of
What are
the
we supposed to say about it?
debate. Isn't that why Sam Altman was a little bit hesitant to push forward? Remember the whole thing with OpenAI, right? Wasn't that a
Yep.
huge debate in there? I might be misspeaking a little bit here, but yeah, I mean nobody knows. But I'll tell you, we had this debate during the internet bubble. I can't tell you how many times I had analysts tell me, "Oh, jobs are going to go away because people won't go to malls anymore." Why won't they go to malls? Well,
Right.
they could just order their books. Amazon's going to disintermediate bookstores, and you can order anything. I mean, it was just this whole thing, and yeah, that did happen, but it also created all these opportunities, and I did a little story on Freed Frank, the big law firm, and how
I saw that.
yeah, and you saw what I said about that. How they're
Yeah.
sort of indulging in AI. They think it's going to be positive. They think they could spend more time with their clients. They think they even the I got that story when I heard a rumor, which turned out not to be true according to them, that they were going to cut back on their incoming class because of AI. You didn't need sort of people doing the sort of scut work. They said no,
Mhm.
no, they're going to free them up to do better things. And so there's an alternative here that people like Andy Kessler, the Wall Street Journal, will talk about.
Yep.
Rarely do technological advancements lead to this sort of doomsday Armageddon stuff. You know what I'm saying?
The AI eats the world. It some of the software shorts have been leveling off.
And Oracle
And
made Oracle had a good quarter, didn't they?
they had a good quarter, right? So a lot of this is being driven by echo chamber, and there was an article in the journal about Bloomberg, and Anthropic saying, well, we can reinvent Bloomberg, and just the sheer, I would say that the sheer venom that users were saying about that threat. And then what people don't understand is that
But by the way,
Bloomberg's not
good
just,
luck reinventing Bloomberg like overnight.
well, I said that someone asked me about it. I said, well, you have a better chance of stepping outside of your spacesuit when you're in a space capsule, going in outer space and finding oxygen than competing against Bloomberg. That's
They've been,
like,
one thing that's amazing about
you will die very quickly.
I will say this. One thing I've always been amazed by that company, and listen, and they do a very good news. They do great news, and if I'm overseas and I want to, if I just want news, I do listen to Bloomberg. I have to admit. I mean, I love Fox. Don't get me wrong. But if I'm like, if you want stuff on stocks that's pretty, and it's also like unbiased, right? They just kind of do the stuff. Bloomberg's good, but they've they've constantly reinvented their data. They keep redoing it. It's a constant sort of churn of making it better. I mean, you just know this based on. So I don't mean this to be an advertisement for Bloomberg. They are not an advertiser of this. So
No,
you do
but I
business with
can
them.
tell you,
But
look, we
you
do
see
we
what I'm
do a lot of
saying?
business with them. Full disclosure, we do a lot of business with them. They've been a great
By
partner
the way,
of
they
ours.
don't pay me, so I'm just saying this out of my
Totally.
knowledge.
I just there's so much that goes through that machine: trade flow,
Right.
communication. I go on and on and on and on. Your news displacing that. You know what? Good luck.
Good luck.
That's my message. Good luck.
Can't
Have a
happen
nice day.
overnight, and that's what I
Good
think
luck.
about Oracle too. I mean, they Larry Ellison is such a brilliant guy, and he's a savant. He survives ups and downs. I just can't imagine that he's allowing his years and years of creating this company to be just sort of destroyed like overnight by a bot. It's just not going to happen. So, um, anyway, that's it. That's it. So if you want to bet that, the market is betting a lot of that. Just be careful.
Um, one of the things that we continue to watch in our X handle. If you look at the energy shorts in the Russell 3000, and then we all want to talk about Battleground Stocks, and we can wrap it up. If you talk about energy shorts in the Russell 3000 on an equal weighted, right? Um, the shorts are actually down. So yes, you have China getting their ships through, but market participants are already fading that event. That to me is an important data point. It's pretty, if you look at the Russell 3000 energy, if you look at the average short interest and return, you see it's actually flattened out. So higher and higher going into um, uh, the end of the year, and it's flattened out. It's actually declined. So if you're looking for what the actual professional investor thinks is going to happen, that's a pretty good indicator. Battleground stocks, some pretty interesting names here, right? Top battleground stock, um, a lot of these a lot of the AI companies like C3 AI is seeing short interest go very high, and that this has become a battleground stock because the market cap has fallen to about $1.3 billion. If you look at a lot of the stocks that are skewing short, which meaning that the shorts are greater than the active long position, IonQ, Quantum, um, GameStop, interestingly enough for you, you'll get something out of that. SoundHound AI, a lot of Serve Robotics, right? Uh, there's a lot of um, of negativity in the AI space, and we watch those stocks where the active long equals the short interest, and particularly when it skews short. When you look at what's skewing long, it's a lot of different things, but a lot of insurance, building materials, electronics, healthcare products, names like Ferguson PLC, which is a retail store, which is interesting, or we were retail. Um, Thermo Fisher Scientific, which is healthcare products. Those things are skewing long. So battleground stocks we've seen actually uh, grow in number over the last a couple of weeks, and that's telling you that money, the dispersion in the marketplace is moving uh, quite a lot. This is why you don't see the index or indices down 15 to 20%. There's a lot of money moving around, and it's keeping the indexes more or less in territory that is painful underneath, but psychologically good for the marketplace.
Interesting. I want to turn back to GameStop for a minute, only because it comes up on my feed constantly. God forbid you say something about GameStop, or I do.
Well, you know what's going to happen. You're going to get inundated by the same people that are telling you the Chinese are through the straits. I mean, it's the same people.
Ryan Cohen's a smart guy, and listen, the company is in balance sheet wise in amazing shape, right? I mean, it's got a lot of cash. I mean, it's but I don't know what it's going to do for a business. Do you? I mean, is it crypto? Is it these video games that are in a sort of market that's in wicked decline? Is it something else?
Charlie, you know this better than anybody. The markets are a faith-based system.
Yeah.
And people have faith in him. And so
they absolutely do.
They have faith.
It's like a Buffett. So, it's like a faith that people have in Buffett. I mean, I guess he could be creating GameStop, GME in the model of Berkshire Hathaway. Is that possible?
I don't know enough to know what he's going to do. Maybe if you invited him on, he'd come on and explain it.
I'm going to try at some point. I think I tried once and I didn't hear it back.
He should.
But I have no animus to him or the stock. I just think that, listen, this stock has not moved really in a year. It's up, 0.6 I just did 0.6% over the past year. I mean, you can get more, you get bigger bang for your buck in a bank account, right? Over the past year. Obviously it's way off its lows and it's way off its highs, right?
Well, what's interesting about our numbers, you have $726 million that's being held by actively managed long money, whether that is mutual fund, hedge fund, allocator, et cetera. and you have about $1.5 billion in shorts. Now, retail, it's very hard to actually peg that number for retail. So this is what we say. You say, look, these things are skewing short, right? So you could see retail come in here and say, hey, these numbers are skewing short. Let's come in and pile in on Robinhood or whatever device they use. That's why we alert it. That's why we put it up there.
Okay. Well, we should.
You want to wrap it up?
Let's wrap it up, Bob. When we're going to get back in the studio? Maybe next week.
2 weeks.
2 weeks. Enjoy your travels.
Thank you. I'm over in Europe right now, so
be safe. But that's the big thing. Be safe.
Yeah, we. It is. It's just a very strange time. It's just a strange time to be traveling, and all this stuff is going on. Not that far away from you. At the same time, it seems like it's very far away, even though it's not.
It's right around the corner, unfortunately. Right. Anyway, stay safe.
Will do.
And that goes for all our viewers out there. Be careful. These are trying times, and everybody should just Wall Street is always a target during these times. So I would say, keep your wits about you. On that note, thank you for tuning in for another riveting edition of Risk and Return. Signing off, Charlie Gasparino with Bob Sloan from S3 Partners.